just run down the checklist. YouTube live stream is captured and in sync and healthy. Our studio is up, and we are bringing in a Rocky Mountain sunrise background. We are bringing up scenes 1 and 2, and we have cameras 1, 2, 3, and 4 rolling, active and in sync. We'll be going live. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome to PJNet Live. Here it is. And normally on Wednesday night, we just enjoy some really good videos, which we've been doing up to this point. But we tonight have a special guest that is in the green room, ready to come on board. But before I bring our special guest in and introduce her, just wanted to remember about a week ago, our guest from last night, Del Didway, had a blog about a musically talented friend of his, Steve Free. And we kind of got to know Steve Free through that, and I made contact with him. Quite an interesting guy, very musically talented. And he was kind enough to send me one of his CD albums called Seasons. And but he didn't just send that. He sent all of this literature that about him and what he does. I got that page. I got a page from the Daily Times that featured him. His pamphlet that he uses for booking. Another article in another paper, and a personal letter handwritten from him. I just. It's really great. I love what we do here. I love what I do. And one of the nice things is the other night we had, you will recall that Roger was in the hospital, and I did not check on him today, but I think he's out of the hospital, but he should be with us Friday night. Okay. But we didn't have our live guest, and so I poked around, and among others, I contacted on Twitter Elizabeth Eady and asked her, could she appear? And she said, well, no, but she had a friend who she thought could. Well, her friend will be here in just a moment, but before we can actually bring her friend in, I am going to have to enlist the aid of our new digital assistant. Alexa. Okay. Alexa, if you don't mind, would you please bring down the studio monitors so that we can have a little room to show everybody what's going on out there. And as you can see from the name right over there, the name is Dru Kristenev. Yeah, she will correct me, I'm sure, which we get here. She is an author of several books, and I do want to talk about her books, but we do have a topic tonight, and that is Christian or biblical standards in journalism. But let me bring Kristen on board now and welcome her to our program. Kristen, you're a missionary, you're an author, you're a writer, you've been a teacher. Give us a little short resume on yourself.
Okay. Well, you can call me Dru.
Dru. Did I say Kristen? Yeah, that's my fault.
Close enough. Kristenev. That's good. My background is as a newspaper publisher from North Los Angeles County years ago. I grew up in the business, publishing business. And we did have a publication out there that we sold off in the 90s. So if you go looking for me on the internet, you're not going to find anything. This was pre-web in a lot of ways. But at the time, we were, our circulation was up to 130,000. So wow. It was a fair-sized publication. Mm-hmm. And I've also been a teacher, mostly college level, but I have run programs for all different ages over the last 30 years. So I've been around for a while, and I put together programs for all kinds of students, all ages, and I have worked a lot with disadvantaged and disabled kids. I have kind of a dual background in teaching, physical therapy, and also then in publishing. So I'm sort of an odd duck.
Okay, but you write, and you've written
Yes,
books.
I write. I'm a writer researcher, and or researcher writer is what I should say. And I work with a phenomenal legal researcher, Toddy Littman. And those folks who are on Twitter might actually be familiar with some of his writings. And we've been working together for 20 years, but Changing Wind Ministries is what we do. And it is, in fact, a political ministry. So some people seem to think that that's an oxymoron, but
Not
I
here.
would disagree.
Do you know what oxymoron literally means? The Latin?
Tell me.
I will. This could be the winning answer on Jeopardy, and if you ever win and get some money, I need some of it. Oxy
Okay.
is the word from which we derive the word axe. It means sharp.
Hmm.
Moron is the Latin word meaning dull. Oxymoron is both sharp and dull. It's opposite. It's contradictory. That's why we now have oxymoron. Yay!
Yeah, well, thank you.
Worthless trivia.
And I appreciate being able to learn something new every time too.
That will do you no good in real life whatsoever, but it is a fact. I Googled it myself. I heard it from a pastor, actually. Now, some of your books are nonfiction, and some are fiction. Some are novels. And you're our guest here. I want you to share about both of them. But I'll be frank, there's so much reality and fact that is undiscovered or unrealized. I have little time for novels, but tell me why. Convince me why I should read a novel
Okay.
or your
Well,
novel.
okay. One of my reviewers called them info novels.
Okay.
And the story behind these, frankly, I never expected to write them in the first place. But back in 1999, when I was living up in Idaho, we had just moved up there from California, realizing what was going on there. And now, of course, it actually has been realized, the demise of the whole state. But at the time, uh, they were trying to, well, they were putting through the, um, I can't remember what it was. And it
Why
had
should
to
I
do,
read it? Read a
well, okay,
non?
well, they were putting through the Roadless Act. And a lot of folks were having trouble trying to figure out what this stuff was. But what came to my mind was that after having taught school, college for so many years, I realized that students and actual people, general people you run into, aren't that interested in reading nonfiction.
That's
And the
sad.
students, it is sad. But the students that I had in particular, they wanted to get their information from documentaries
Hmm.
or stories somewhere or another. And we've seen that more and more growing in the entertainment industry. And this is, talk about fake news, which we haven't actually talked about yet, but will.
We will.
The documentaries that are put out, so many of them are based on wishful thinking.
Okay.
And this is what I kept coming up against. And what the Lord laid on my heart was to write a novel, and just one, that would actually be a little more interesting to women at this point and would have backstories that were conservative. Because so many of the books that people would read, novels in particular at that time in the 90s, most of them had liberal backstories, and they were pushing all these different, the liberal agenda.
Hmm.
So that was the concept behind it, and I didn't actually get the storyline for Land Barons until 2004 when I came back out to Idaho. I won't go into the whole story on that, but it had to do with the environmental movement, and particularly what was going on in the Idaho region with lumber and the different industries that were suffering because of, well, not only the economy, but the ecological or greenies, whatever you want to call them, the environmentalists that were putting pressure on industries that relied on our natural resources. And so that's where the first book came from. But what I do is I write in actual, not just actual facts, but actual events. And each of my books have actually turned out to be pretty prophetic in a number of ways, which is not what I expected, but that's what happened. And when I first came out with Land Barons, well, I finished it in 2007, and I was submitting it to a publisher in 2012, and he read it, and he asked me about a specific incident that occurred in Washington State, and asked me if I knew about it, and I said, no, I had no clue. And it was something that was exactly what had occurred in the book, but I'd finished the book 5 years before. And so that's how it started. But each of the books center on different things. Land Barons is on basically environmental situations with the land and people losing control of their own land. The second book, Gold Baron, I wrote and published before the 2008 election. And what I did was, although I changed the names of the characters in order to, well, I did get death threats anyway, but to protect myself and my researcher, if it was at all possible, it added the connection between Obama and George Soros. And at the time, people did not know who George Soros was. They do now, but I've been following him since 1989. And I write in that book exactly what I found out about him then and all the research that I'd done after that. And it's written into the book, though places are changed to a degree. Names definitely are. And I sent all that stuff to people in the media, and George Soros became better known in 2010. And I do know that some of it was through the efforts that I did, because some of the folks on air used direct quotes out of my press releases. So it doesn't matter that we didn't get any credit, Changing Wind. The whole point is that people do now know who he is. And so, you know, God uses little folks like us to get information out. So that was Gold Baron, and it has to do with the politics and whatnot. The third book was Energy Barons. It has to do with the clean coal industry, and I was very blessed with the people that I worked with in Wyoming, in that my consultant was the presenter on the coal industry for Heritage Foundation and for Congress. And so I was put in touch with people out of the blue. I just happened to call somebody, and it turned out to be the right guy. Okay. The fourth book is about basically Obamacare and where it could go. It's called Blood Barons, and it sounds like science fiction, but it is not. And each of these things has actual events in it, actual things that have occurred or could look to occur. And then the last book that I just finished last year is called Unknown Predator, and it has solutions in it. Each of these books do involve solutions. Now, this is what we are. Changing Wind is a solutions-based ministry. And Toddy Littman is an amazing researcher along these lines in terms of helping people through an administrative process for resources and recourse when it comes down to dealing with government regulations. So that's what this book does. And it has to do with ranchers, farmers, people who use the land and who are being blocked from utilizing their own land due to EPA regulations, which are still a big problem, and particularly out in Oregon, which is where I was. It took me 6 years to research this book and put it together, and I've been told that it's a great read, but it also has lots of good information to help people with solutions as to what they need to do, and particularly if they're being hauled through court and they're being blocked from using their own property. And it is a huge problem out there. The ranchers are really suffering. So that's Unknown Predator. So these are all the info novels.
So they're info. Okay. Well, That is a little bit more palatable to me, where you can kind of say based on a true story, and still take some literary license, I would assume, or
Oh, yeah.
literary liberties, as whatever that y'all call those things. But now, one of the things that piqued my interest is you have a background in writing and in journalism. So you and I, when we were having our off-air conversations, we started discussing a recurring theme in some of your more contemporary work and in your social media presence is this notion of biblical standards applying to journalism, and you are heading up a movement to actually get these standards implemented either in existing schools or perhaps a new online school. Tell us, I guess we got to work it backwards. Why do we need such a thing? I mean, wait a minute, maybe we have to work it forwards. What do you mean when you say biblical standards for journalism?
Well, there's, I think you were right the first time, is that we have to look at what the problem is to begin with. We have a problem, we need a solution. And the problem is that journalism is not journalism. You know, you get people like Sean Hannity even saying journalism is dead. Well, it's been dead a lot longer than he thought it has. And a lot of that goes back to the training that these students are getting in schools of journalism. There are very few of them actually left that I can find. Most of them have changed their names to schools of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a big difference between the two. Mm-hmm. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going back to a couple of things that I've written as part of my proposal for what is called the Scribes College of Journalism. And there's a reason that it's called Scribes College, because this does go back to, like you brought up, biblical standards of reporting, journaling. And actually, I start out in the section that I call the rationale. Now, writing a proposal for any big project, you have a lot of different things that you have to address. And I'm also a grant writer. So I'm taking that basic format in order to put together this college. And the proposal is in its finished form. So I'm putting it out there. And I know that the Lord is behind this. We are going to get this college started. And I already have the basic instrument together for that. And we'll discuss that a little bit further down the road. But in the rationale, the first thing that I lead off with is Jeremiah 36. And it is, I'm just going to read it. It says, "And it came to pass in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, that this word came unto Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Take thee a roll of a book, and write therein all the words that I have spoken unto thee. Then Jeremiah called Baruch, the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote from the mouth of Jeremiah all the words of the Lord, which he had spoken unto him upon a roll of a book." I'm going to read one little bit further. I'm a writer, and you may have noticed that I'm not the best speaker on earth, but I am a writer. I think I'm a half decent one. So what I have here is, most significant among the duties of the ancient scribe was to meticulously record events of the initial instruction or witness without embellishment, and to copy stela, tablets, parchments, papyri, and scrolls without deviating from the original. That's what a scribe did. And a modern journalist comes from this. This is the definition and basically the etymology of journalism. And this is from the mid-14th century. Book of church services, from the Anglo-French journal and Old French journal, a day, time, a day's travel or work. And it's properly that which takes place daily. Noun, use of adjective meaning daily, of the day, from the late Latin name diurnalis, daily, from Latin, it goes through that. But the point is that it is a day, a time, a day's travel or work. That is what a journal is. It's putting together, it's writing down what occurred. Don't embellish it. And when you go back to the biblical standards, like what Baruch did, he was told to write down exactly what came out of the prophet's mouth. Don't write anything except that. And that's why it's called Scribes College of Journalism. Does that make any sense to you?
It does, and I wanted to interject that the very colloquial use of the word clergyman or clergy is derived from the Vatican. They had clerics, clerical workers, who were kind of what you're describing. They would scribe. Notice we use the word describe, which but they would write down these things. They were the people. They were the people that the little secretaries that did that. The very use of our word clergy today is rooted in scribery, so to speak. Let me ask you a serious. And don't take it wrong, but I'm curious. There's two things. Let me start with the first one. The today's news. There are two problems. You're pointing out one of them is that we're not getting a literal translation of events. Okay, there's always the spin, and it's become a form of entertainment. But as a psychologist or as a sociologist, which I majored in from the People's Republic of Florida State University, the Berkeley of the Confederacy, one of the things that we studied is the function of the news is twofold. One is to bring the story, to the public, but they also can't bring every story to the public, so they become, in effect, a censorship organization. They can't possibly bring you all the news, so they have to prioritize it. And as such, they get to set the agenda of public conversation about the news. That assumes that the news they bring is compliant as a scribe would comply in the first place. So you've got a problem here. Let's suppose we write everything down. Who gets to decide how much of this actually makes it out into the news media?
Well, it does come down to, let's put it this way. I define journalism as a trade, not a profession. Because the problem with a profession is that you are professing a belief. Okay,
interesting.
A tradesman does a work. An electrician or whatever, they have a specific job to do, and they follow the rules, they get it done, but they don't interject their beliefs into it. And this is what it comes down to when we're talking about schools of communication. Now, I saw this happen at Washington State University. What used to be called the School of Journalism became the Edward R. Murrow School of Journalism, if I remember correctly, is now the School of Communications. And communications, is marketing. It's putting your
transferring an idea from one brain to another.
But it's all connected up to what you have been raised to believe, and through education. The students coming up over the last 40 years, and I'm going to go back that far because I think it's actually further than that. This started happening when I was in school as a kid, and we were being inundated with a liberal mindset. And that even came through mathematics and the STEM studies that they do today, the technology. It's still related around a liberal mindset and how you can get your message out there, because it's about messaging. It is not about telling the story of an event. And that's what communication is about. Communication is about communicating your feelings and your emotions. Journalism is a trade, and it is not about emotions. It's not supposed to be about emotions.
Well, it's a complicated issue. Dru, because when people ask me, what I do, I say I'm a propagandist. And of course, that usually draws a negative emotional reaction from them.
Ooh, trigger.
Yeah. And I say, well, look, let me take what you just said a next step further. why in the world would I want to communicate to you an idea? Well, because I have an objective. I want to get you to think a certain way. It's called
Exactly.
persuasion. Okay, and I don't know. I have in some of the studying that I have done, I was introduced to this movie in a sociology class in Florida State. Have you ever heard of the movie Triumph of the Will? I guess
don't
not.
think I have. No, I don't think
You,
I have.
I hope that you will Google that on YouTube, and you don't need to watch the whole thing. It's an hour and a half, but watch some of the summaries of it. This was the first full-scale attempt to use, as you would describe, communication, but it is outright blatant propaganda. It was produced in 1934, and it absolutely glorifies Adolf Hitler.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, and the techniques that they use, by the way, are not new. At the time, they used them. They had been in use. But this was the first time it was done on such a scale because, of course, it had all of the financial resources of the Nazi Party at the time, who had just come into power behind it. And look at the effect. In fact, that movie is so powerful, to this day it is banned in Germany. Okay? That's the power of propaganda. Now, is anything in that movie fiction or untrue? Nope. It's actually just it looks like a documentary. These events happened, okay? But the way that there are techniques that they use in the way the camera angles are and the lighting that make Hitler kind of look like he's illuminating light, you know.
Yeah, I do believe that I have seen it. I didn't put it together with the name.
Powerful. Now, obviously, that was being done for a maniacal, historically, you know. But my point is this: the techniques, the craft of propaganda can be used for either. It can be used to spread the gospel.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, and that's why I describe myself as sort of a propagandist. Is yes, I want to communicate, but that communication has a purpose, and my purpose is to persuade others to think not like I think, but like Christ is.
Well,
become disciples.
Yes, you want to use it to share the truth. Propaganda is the twisting of the truth
Depends.
in so many different ways. Well, you know, at least that,
Well, the best lies are 99% true.
exactly.
Okay.
And you know, people like to quote Goebbels, who said, you know,
The
that
big lie.
yeah, you say a lie over and over again, it becomes
It's a big
truth.
lie. Has to be
Well,
big.
you know, the thing is, he's not the one who originally made created that quote. It was an American advertising fella who did that.
Well, think about the practical use of propaganda. All advertisements that you see are propaganda.
Well, sure.
They're trying to persuade you to take. It's a call to action of some kind. But let me go back to lies and truth. How far back do you want to go? Well, I want to go back to the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
Satan asked Eve, "Did God really?" That word "really" is the fulcrum of the whole collapse. Did God really say that if you ate that fruit from this tree in the center of the garden that you would die? He didn't ask a yes or no question. He used that word "really" to put that doubt in there. Because if he just would have said, "Did God say that?" Well, first of all, the fact that he was able to quote it tells me that Satan knows what God said.
Oh, yes.
He knows it. Okay, so why is he asking Eve? And by the way, what did Eve know about dying at the time? I mean, how much familiar? It goes back that far.
Right.
Well, I assume that plants may have died in the Garden of Eden. I don't know. When you ate them, I guess they did. But in any event,
an interesting point.
The idea of persuasion is as old as mankind, and using different communication, art, skill, craft, techniques, or lies, whatever you want to call them,
Right.
is as old as humanity itself.
Exactly. And so you have biblical standards because we're talking about the Bible, which is the oldest story on earth. It's
Well,
the
and
oldest story in the
it
universe,
was written
right?
down, so that we could
Right.
understand it. So here was my question, and I've already asked you earlier, but for the benefit of our audience.
Yeah, and me, because I probably forgot.
Well, you won't. Given the state of communication, news, as you might call it, today, my take is that people select their news channel based on their own predispositions. If you're a conservative, you might possibly get your information from Breitbart or Fox News or some other conservative outlet, but you flip the channel there because it tends to affirm your predispositions anyway. Now, if you're on the other side, if you're a liberal, you're not going to go to Fox News for your news or Breitbart. You're going to go to where? MSNBC, CNN, or somewhere that's
Right.
got a much more liberal point of view, which you point out is nothing to do with news or scribing.
That's communication.
Now, but people love it. People love it. Now, you're prescribing what sounds to me like a very bland diet of raw veggies. Where's the fat, the meat, and the sugar and the spice in what you're? Let's say you get your College of Journalism going. Are these people really going to be able to find a job?
Well, so far as I understand, one of the ministries that I have been in contact with, and it is an international ministry. It's a major one. I'm not going to mention who they are. And their response to me, even though that they don't have a situation to they don't have the resources right now because they're setting up their own Bible college. It's brand new, and they don't have everything set up where this is something that they could institute right away. What they point out is that from some of the Christian colleges where at least some of these journalistic standards are being taught, are getting jobs on Fox News and some of these other major networks. But the thing about the networks today is that, and here I agree with some of the pundits that you'll hear now and again, is one of the reasons we have such a demise of journalism in itself is because we now have these 24-hour stations that are supposed to be telling news all the time. Well, they don't.
No.
They don't know how to fill it with constant news stories. Now, it could be done because there is, as you pointed out, there's always news out there that's not getting covered.
Right.
But because they pick and choose, and they can, and this comes down to another area of it, and having been a newspaper publisher, I understand that you have to balance, you got to balance the books.
Yeah.
News does not pay for itself. That's what the
Never has
advertising
it?
end of
Yeah.
it. That's why there's advertising, is that you have a publication, and whether it's online or it's hard copy, we had a broadsheet publication, and probably half the people out there listening say, "What's broadsheet?" Okay, well, I'm not going to go into discussing that.
It's printed on a web press, I'll tell you that.
Yes, and I used to fly a press. I mean, I worked every part of this business. The only thing I didn't do was run the press myself. But you had to bring the money in order to publish the news. But
Yeah.
a good newspaper person knew how to cover news, particularly for their community, so that they'd be getting all sides of it. And you weren't getting just somebody's viewpoint. Now, that's what quotations are for. When you go out and do an interview, you quote somebody. And that's where you get the opinion. It comes from them. It should not come from the writer. And they've been editorializing the news for decades now. And I'll tell you what, the mission of Scribes, and I have it here, it's just one short paragraph. Can I read it to you?
Have at it.
Okay. The mission of Scribes College of Journalism is to inspire and instruct students with the heritage, skills, professionalism, accountability, and responsibility of the press. invoke the integrity and fidelity to truth necessary to ply the trade, teach biblical ethics and standards for recording history, what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called his story, referring to Jesus Christ as the Alpha and the Omega, Revelation 22:13. Accurately reporting news, interviewing witnesses, and conveying facts fully and in proper context. Now, as you know, whether you're a lay scholar or, however, a Bible scholar, somebody who pays attention to the word, it is about context. News is the same way. It's about context. And when you take it out of context, you lose the whole purpose of the story, or even where the news is going to take you and what you can learn from it. And that's what we're dealing with this whole fake news thing. And what kills me is that the term fake news was first put forward by CNN. But the genius of Donald Trump was to turn it on them.
I read something today that the Food Network now has more viewers, has a larger audience than CNN. I don't know if it was true or not, but that's what they said. Here's what I feel like we're up against, and I'm not against you. I'm with you. It's the same battle I fight here. Is I don't want to. I'm not going to wear a hat, and I'm not going to get all the drama. Okay, I believe that there is a need for just having people share their Christian walk with others, and people can relate to that, and that people would come here for encouragement and hope. But that's a tough hill to climb, because really, let me give you this analogy. I am old enough that I remember when professional wrestling was something I watched on television, an athletic event.
Boy, well, that's going back ways.
Okay? Yes, ma'am. It came on Saturday afternoon with Gordon Soley.
I remember.
And these were men who were physically fit, like they are today in professional wrestling, but it was really just a wrestling match, and it was about physical, it was about wrestling as a sport. Now compare that with wrestling today. 90% of what you see is not wrestling. It is a big show where they're bashing chairs on people's heads, and the talk and the smack is constant. 99% of professional wrestling today is drama, not athletics. That is what the news has become. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And it is a problem. And that's why you still have people today who will go back to, here I'm kind of letting my age out of the bag too, to, Walter Cronkite or Huntley Brinkley. And in the day, I still to this day, I have no idea what Huntley and Brinkley, what their political views were. None.
So all right, everybody, well, not everybody, but let's use Walter Cronkite as just sort of an example. Would that be a better picture of biblical journalism, biblical standards in journalism? How well on a scale of 1 to 10 would Walter Cronkite line up on that?
Probably a 6 or 7,
Okay.
maybe. I mean, and because today we're probably at a 1 or 2. It's all about opinion. And when you go back to the Bible, go back to the stories that are written. It is a historical book. The whole Old Testament, even the New Testament, it's all historical. And this is the wonderful thing about it, is that people don't realize. You have a lot of folks out there, and I have members who will tell me this. They say, oh, it's just a stories written down by people, is passed down, by mouth all these years, and it wasn't kept up, and they added their own ideas to it. But that's not the case at all. It was handed down very meticulously, the storylines, but not just that, the exact words that came from the prophets, or exactly what happened. And when you look at the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books that were written by Moses, and where did he learn it? He learned it from, the genealogy and everything by rote, and was able to write it down specifically, and it was inspired that God had him write specifically what he did write for us even today. And when you look at the New Testament, and you have got 4 gospels. Now, you've got the standard for witness in a court of law, which I believe is based on the court, the temple court. You look into that. I mean, I've written on it, and I'm not going to go into detail on it now, but a court of law, biblically, you need 2 witnesses. God gave us 4. And in order to understand what Jesus did and how he did it, you don't have that in any other situation, whether you want to call it religion or even a historical tale. When it comes down to the Bible and how well the word has been preserved in the old manuscripts, you don't have anywhere near as many copies that match like you do in the Bible of any of the historians. So you go to Tacitus or any of those from the past, Greek or Roman, there might be a few remaining manuscripts, and they don't match up the same way as the manuscripts of the Bible do.
Well, in many of the writings that are not canonized, that were contemporaries, but they were journaling at the time of those events, even though they're not canonized, they are in harmony with the canonized scriptures.
That's right.
Can't think of the guy's name. But he was very popular, quite a journalist, you might say, or quite a scribe anyway.
Oh, you're not talking about Josephus, are you?
Yes, Josephus.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And he was an eyewitness to what occurred with the Jewish war and all. Of course, right. I've read.
I have not read Josephus, but I've seen it cited alongside the scriptures, and it's good corroborating evidence that even if you believe this is a story, why would Josephus corroborate this story?
Well, he was a priest. He was a Pharisee. He also was with the Sadducees, and he even spent time with the Essenes. He was an amazing guy. Plus, he was a general for the Jews, and the only one who survived a massacre. And then he prophesied to Vespasian that he would become emperor. And Vespasian had just been released from a death sentence because Nero had died. And what happened? Vespasian did become emperor along with his son Titus. I think I got that correct. Somebody will let you know if I've got it incorrect somewhere. But the point is that Josephus is an amazing corroboration of so much. And because he was a priest, he was taught all of this. And that's why he was able to corroborate it so well. Anyway, it does come down to these different standards for what has been passed down as the Holy Bible for us to study, and the manuscripts hang together, and they're the same. But you can't say that about anything else that has been written over history, that over time, that hasn't changed in one way or another. And these are the standards that I'm saying need to be reintroduced into journalism.
Right,
in that, I mean, there is one thing. If I am going to be there as a witness to something, and I have witnessed a number of different things and some tragedies, a little bit of color from what I see is probably going to creep in. And, as a writer, you're going to have that occur to a degree, but you do the best that you can to describe what happened. You use to describe yourself, that term, without twisting the tale. That's what fiction is for. That's, and unfortunately, what we have going on right now is and this includes Fox News and some of these other conservative news sites as well, is that they like to put their own spin on what they see as what's occurring, and I understand it from a conservative
viewpoint. They couldn't survive without it.
Well, yeah, right now they can't, because that's the way media has gone. But I do believe that there is a hunger for just the plain truth.
I hope you're right, Drew.
I'm
but
hanging
given
my hat on it.
I
When I don't
and
wear a
I
hat,
admire
but
your
whatever.
courage let me say this: we've talked about a lot of things. We're going to have to draw a beat on it here. So let me ask you:
Yes.
all right, you've got the model, you've got the proposal. Where do we go from here? What's going to happen next, and what is the prospects of us coming back on the air at some point and saying we're open for business? Here's where you go. Join us and be a biblically standards based scribe, journalist.
Okay. Well, this is where God comes into it big time. And I have learned over the past 15 years, and particularly over the past 8.5, where I have been on the road. I gave up everything in order to be an independent Christian missionary. And I go to where God calls me to go, helping in the different things that the Lord has given me gifts to help folks with. Now, this is something that He's put on my heart to do. He's the one who gave me this whole program. I mean, that I would even think of this on my own is, I don't know that that's possible. I don't even know the books I couldn't have written without the Lord giving me the storylines. But with the proposal, and this is what's happened with every project that I've done in the past, and I've done some pretty good sized projects at different universities where I've taught. And I write it, I put it out there, and right now I'm reaching out to some major ministries, some of them that have Bible colleges or Christian colleges that don't have an actual journalism program that would be interested in having this as an affiliated program. And it might be online. I've been investigating the idea of an online college since 2014 when I had other educators come to me and say, you need to start a college. Well, I don't think they meant this kind of a college, but that's what the Lord finally
Drew,
figured out I need to
we
do.
we haven't known each other very long. I think that's an interesting possibility, but I can assure you this: you will need some technology help.
Oh, I
Okay.
know. Believe me, I know it. Yeah, well, you've already seen what a technophobe I am, but
But
oh,
okay,
well,
so
that's the point. Something just a mouse just kind of whispered over here. So you volunteering?
you
Oh
offering?
boy, that made me cough.
You offering? We can. Well, so how long have you had this thing kind of fully developed and proposed? I mean, is this something you've been what's the word, peddling among the colleges for 2 months, 2 years, 2 weeks? And how long do you think it's going to take?
Well, God doesn't work on a timeline. First of all,
Yeah, but we're all mortal.
well, in this life, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's only a year ago
Okay.
that He placed this on my heart that this is what I needed to do. And
Okay.
when I started telling
So
people I
the
was going to
genesis.
put together, they just kind of looked at me cross-eyed.
Okay.
Well,
All
okay.
right. All right. Fair enough.
But the first thing I did was I wrote an article at Canada Free Press. I'm a columnist at CanadaFreePress.com, and I would ask people to go and look me up. It's real easy. If you go to the columnist archives, I'm the top one on the list because of the A
Hey.
period. But anyway, so I wrote an article called Reviving Journalism. And that's where I explained what the situation is and why we need this. And from there, I was put through, it took about, I'd say 4 months to craft the basics of this proposal.
To draft it up.
Yes, the rationale, the program need, the urgent need.
The abstract. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
It's like a patent application.
I
Yeah.
also have drafted a basic curriculum.
Okay.
Well, I've been putting together syllabi for years, So it's all there except for a budget. You can't do a budget until you know where you're going to be. If it's going to be online or
Right.
if we're going to have a location, which I hope we do, because we're going to need the media background in order to do it, some kind of a studio. And as you know, a studio doesn't have to be a big fancy thing.
It is amazing what we can do today. The possibilities
Yes.
are now. If you've contacted some people. Has their reception been cold, hot, warm? Well, what kind of feedback are you getting?
I am getting actually excited feedback on this. People, for some reason, nobody's really thought about it before in terms of, yeah, everybody complains that, well, we got to do something about journalism. All we're getting is fake news, this, that, and the other, and they don't know what to do about it. This is what the Lord laid on my heart needs to be done. And I contacted Bible College. I happen to be in Mississippi at the time, right now, because I was called here for ministry. And I was talking to an education major. He's a master's student. And he got real excited about it. And he took me in to see the president of his college. And I gave him the first sections of the proposal and gave him my spiel. And he says, this is great. I mean, he was really excited about it, but they are a brand new college and they don't have the resources to institute a program like this. I've talked to a number of different pastors who are real interested in it, and some of them have marketing backgrounds with international corporations, and they see a need for it. The one major ministry actually referred me to two other of their partner ministries that do have resources. I haven't heard back from them yet. So it's growing now. And, I told you before when we talked privately that you know very well from scripture that God uses the foolish in order to get things done. Well, here I am. And evidently, we're getting something going. I feel very strongly that it'll occur. Every single one of the programs that I have written proposals for or written grants for, whatever needed to be done, they've happened. And this one's going to happen too.
All right.
So anyone who wants to get involved, you can catch up with me through Canada Free Press. My bio is there. And there are ways to reach me via email. I'm also on Twitter as Gold Baron 08, because that's when the book came out. I go by A. Dru Kristenev, because last year I was locked out of my account 13 times in 12 months. So I don't have that big a following, so I don't know why they thought I was so threatening. But this is what needs to be done. Social media is getting more and more censored, and we're being cut back in the way we communicate. We may have to go back to pamphleteering for all I know.
Or maybe we can just become Patriot Journalist Network and get these ordinary people a voice, because I think that for a while I had very high hopes that social media, and it's still true to some extent, gives us a voice that we've never had, but I can assure you that the social media landscape has become very hostile to the message of the gospel. And we won't go there. We've been at it
perhaps.
Maybe another time. Dru, thanks for sharing so much tonight. Some of this stuff is I'm trying to get my head around it, and I see I see an end result that would be healthy if there's actually an appetite for the truth out there, and I wish I could be more optimistic, but maybe there's a way to tell the truth in a way that captures the imagination, that inspires people to do good things, rather than just put us in a constant state of anger and misery. And I think that's the end result when you go to the media today. You just get worked up and angry about something you really can't even change. So it wouldn't matter to most of us. I'm commenting now. But thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. I'm glad we're able to get over some of the technical hurdles that make this possible, and thank you for your cooperation. I also want to give a shout out to your handler and producer, Anne Marie, for helping out.
Yes, Anne Marie Fairchild.
Yeah, she
I'm so thankful for her.
Yeah, without her help, I think this would not be possible. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your message, and we maybe we'll circle back and see how things are going.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to host me on your program.
All
It's an
right.
answer to prayer.
There you go. All right.
And God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you very much. Dru with us live. Folks, that was a lot to take in. I don't know if you can get your head around that or not, but let me do this. There's a lot of background research that I didn't even do prior to this show that would really be required to understand the full breadth of what she's talking about. But when this is produced on YouTube, if she sends me the links to some of the articles that she was talking about, we'll add those to the description of the video. And again, maybe the day will come and we'll circle back and find out any progress that's been made. Hey, great to have a guest on Wednesday night. We normally don't. Maybe we'll start kind of a tradition. You know, last Wednesday we had a guest who was pre-recorded, but we presented it on Wednesday night. Freddie Davis was with us, another author. And maybe we can have Wednesday night as sort of, kept open for whoever might have something to share that might be of interest to you all out there. Well, hey, thanks for being a part of PJNet Live. Tomorrow, Friday night, we're on the air every night. We start about 9 o'clock. We have a great fellowship. Hope you'll join, even when we don't have a live guest, okay? And then on Friday night, we should have Roger. Saturday night, Wild Bill for America will be with us. And we just keep having a good time and a great fellowship right here on PJNet Live.